Endurance is not about pushing harder. It's about staying faithful when progress feels invisible, when strength feels thin, and when the only thing left is a quiet decision to keep going anyway. And welcome to Speaking from the Heart, folks. I'm Richard Fontanie, and this is where we explore the deeper intersections of faith, work, and everyday life. Today, we reflect on endurance, not as a sheer determination, but as a spiritual discipline rooted in trust. Many of us are walking through seasons that test our patience, test our energy, and test our hope. We show up, we pray, we work, yet results feel slow or absent. This conversation is for anyone wondering whether staying the course still matters when the road feels long and uncertain. Now, before we continue, if this podcast matters to you, please take a moment to subscribe and share it with someone you trust. That helps this message reach others who may need encouragement today. Now, let's get on with today's episode. The courage to keep going. Endurance as a spiritual discipline. In our spiritual life, endurance is rarely dramatic. It does not announce itself with fanfare or arrive with any applause. Instead, it shows up quietly, day after day, as we make choices. It is the discipline of staying present when leaving would be much, much easier. Endurance teaches us boundaries around our expectations, timeliness, and even our emotional reactions. We learn that faithfulness is not measured by speed, but by steadiness. Spiritually, endurance develops us. It stretches our capacity to trust when outcomes are delayed. It invites humility, reminding us that we are not in control of everything we care about. It teaches us to let go when we want to hang on. It teaches us to subjugate our ego when we want to boast and blow our own horn. Endurance teaches us restraint. We stop forcing answers and start allowing God to work beyond our understanding. In this way, endurance becomes an act of surrender. It says, I will remain open, obedient, and available, even when I cannot see the full picture. That posture builds deep spiritual resilience and a quieter, stronger confidence rooted in trust rather than urgency. The New Testament repeatedly frames endurance as essential to spiritual maturity. James writes that perseverance must finish its work so that we may be mature and complete and lacking nothing. This is not a promise of comfort, but a discipline to behold. Paul often speaks of running the race with perseverance, not to win the approval of others, but to remain faithful to our own calling. Endurance, in this sense, becomes a boundary against despair. Despair not in a clinical sense, but rather a way that prevents us from quitting prematurely or from running away from our values. Jesus himself models endurance through obedience, remaining faithful even when misunderstood, opposed, or abandoned. His endurance was rooted in trust and humility. The gospel invites us to view endurance as participation in something larger than immediate results. When we endure with faith, we align with the rhythm of growth that unfolds over time, shaping character more deeply than success ever could. The Psalms give voice to endurance through honest lamentations, and I'm sure from my voice right now. Again and again, the psalmist cries out from places of waiting, confusion, and fatigue. Yet, these prayers rarely end in despair. They end in a quiet call to action that points to the future. I will trust, I will wait, and I will hope. The Psalms teach us that endurance does not deny pain. It brings pain into relationship with the divine that dwells within us. Waiting becomes an act of trust rather than a passive gesture, and through it, boundaries begin to emerge. The psalmist refuses to abandon faith even as we question outcomes. In this sense, endurance becomes a prayer sustained over time. In the Psalms, we learn that God welcomes perseverance, shaped by honesty, patience, and hope, and held very gently. As well, endurance reflects universal values that transcend belief systems, such as patience and integrity, commitment, and trust. From a gospel perspective, however, endurance is deeply relational. It rests on the belief that we are not walking alone, that we have something, a way to overcome our shortcomings based on gospel teachings. When we endure, we practice a hope that does not depend on immediate results. We learn to set boundaries to avoid comparing ourselves with others, becoming impatient, and judging ourselves. If we listen deeply, we can strengthen compassion, love, forgiveness, and justice. Endurance teaches us to remain faithful to what is right, even when recognition isn't forthcoming. It strengthens compassion for others who may carry unseen burdens. In both spiritual and universal terms, endurance is a stabilizing force. It grounds us amid uncertainty and prevents reactive decisions that may compromise our values. Over time, endurance cultivates wisdom, and we become less driven by urgency and more guided by a sense of purpose. The quiet confidence we experience becomes a witness, offering reassurance to others navigating their own long seasons of uncertainty. In business, endurance often appears during seasons of slow growth. A business owner may invest consistently without seeing immediate returns. Doubt creeps in, but endurance in this moment becomes the discipline of staying aligned with values rather than chasing shortcuts. One entrepreneur continued refining systems, serving clients faithfully, and maintaining ethical boundaries during a prolonged downturn. And here I'm reminded of my grandfather, and I have to go a long ways back for this one. My grandfather owned a grocery store and endured a substantial setback during the Depression. He continued to provide service and support to his customers, not thinking about himself, but thinking more about them. Eventually, trust within his community grew, his customer base increased, and stability returned. And the endurance he practiced in the face of uncertainty became the foundation for long-term sustainability. Now, these stories remind us that endurance in business protects integrity. It prevents decisions made from fear and preserves trust that pays dividends over time, even when progress feels delayed. In the workplace, endurance often means staying professional in often draining environments. Now, here's a story about an employee who remained committed to quality despite difficult leadership. He resisted cynicism and he resisted disengagement. Rather than withdrawing, he set emotional boundaries and focused on what he could control. And over time, his loyalty was noticed, opportunities eventually emerged, and for him, endurance did not mean tolerating harm. It meant remaining faithful to standards while wisely discerning his next steps. Now, this kind of endurance builds credibility. It communicates reliability, and it communicates self-respect. When practiced with boundaries, endurance strengthens resilience without sacrificing dignity or well-being during challenging times. In life, endurance shows up in caregiving, relationships, and personal healing. One individual supported a family member through a prolonged illness, learning to pace energy and let go of unrealistic expectations. She drew her strength from the divine within, and endurance became a daily presence for her. Small acts of faithfulness mattered more than dramatic gestures. Over time, this endurance deepened compassion and patience. Life did not suddenly become easier, but it became more grounded. Endurance created a window for grace to shine through it. That reminded everyone in that family that love, expressed consistently, even quietly, carries transformative power beyond what they can see in the present circumstances. So now let's ask ourselves 3 questions. Yes, you and me. Questions that may take time and reflection to answer honestly. Where are we called to endure rather than running away? What expectations might we need to forego in order to remain faithful? How can we turn endurance into an act of trust rather than an act of tension? This week, choose one area that requires endurance. Commit to one faithful step rather than a dramatic change. The saying goes, one step at a time. Take a few moments to reflect and to pray. Center yourself in the present moment and trust that this quiet unfolding really matters. Remember that endurance is not wasted effort. It's a spiritual discipline in motion. So stay gently faithful. I'm Richard Fontanie, signing off for now. Let's meet again next week when we explore to manage fear and uncertainty from a spiritual perspective. See you then, not before. Bye now.